This is Groucho Marx. Did you know that your chances of surviving an atom bomb attack are excellent? It's true.
This is basic civil defense information from the Department of Defense, Office of Civil Defense, Washington. If you're caught in the open and there's a brilliant nuclear flash in the distance, take cover immediately.
I knew that my mother had, quote, worked on the atom bomb. As a child, that's what we called it.
You use that phrase that I worked on the atomic bomb, and it sounds like I built it. That rankles me.
I knew she was just a teenager when they built the first bomb, but I was intrigued that she was involved years later. But it was top secret, and she couldn't talk about it. I knew nothing about it. I always, as a child, envisioned that she was in some James Bond movie, kind of spy, espionage thing, and it was very compelling to me, and I just thought that she was so cool. My friends' moms were, you know, making Rice Krispie treats, but my mom, she was doing secret government work with the atom bomb.
My mother came to visit me in the mid to late 90s. And, you know, I knew she had lived in San Francisco, and we've never really talked about what she did there. And I remember I picked her up from the airport, and we're driving north on 101 towards San Francisco. And if you look to the right, you can see Candlestick Park. And right to the right of that is this 5-story white building with no windows in it. And she said to me, "Oh, there's the RAD lab." And I said, "The what?" And she said, "That's the RAD lab, the Naval Radiological Defense Laboratory. That's where I worked." And everything inside me went, "Oh." And then I just immediately just was like, "Well, what do you mean that's where you worked?" And I just started asking her all these questions.
I went into the Navy in 1952. And I went to officer indoctrination program at Newport.
She had Queen security clearance. That was a pretty high security clearance to have.
They give you choices of type of career you want to pursue. I had put down medical research, and so that put me in good with the Naval Radiological Defense Laboratory in San Francisco. I had no concept of what that was all about. I knew that they were doing research and had something to do with radiation, and that it was associated with the Atomic Energy Commission.
You are a citizen of the free world. You are the target. Our president has told us that even against the most powerful defense, an aggressor in possession of an effective number of atomic bombs could cause hideous damage.
I grew up during the Cold War, and we were all afraid of the Soviet Union because they were building bigger and bigger weapons. The US needed people like my mom to help test even bigger weapons.
So, okay, America has all these bombs and so does Russia. Now, what would a nuclear war mean medically, and what's the...
In the early 80s, I heard Helen Caldicott speak. She was talking about the proliferation of nuclear weapons.
In 1978, when I first started speaking about nuclear war, most Americans said to me, "Look, it's better to be dead than red."
Lying, dirty, shrewd, godless, this is the true nature of the enemy. This is communism.
The other thing they're saying to us is that it is possible to fight and win a nuclear war. Have you not read that lately or seen that on the television?
We must be ready every day, all the time, to do the right thing if the atomic bomb explodes. The most important thing of all is to duck and cover yourself.
So he started describing the medical effects of nuclear weapons dropping on Boston, on Seattle.
Listening to her, I kept thinking about the work that my mom did, connected with atomic energy, and it really motivated me to become more active in the anti-nuclear movement.
I was very politically involved and started a group called Atomic Daughters, actually. And then I ended up in an interview on NPR.
MT Sylvia told about her mother, Pauline, who was a U.S. Navy lieutenant in 1953.
When I was a child, she talked about being very proud of it and showed me pictures of herself. And last summer, I pulled out those pictures and she would not let me show them to anyone. She's ashamed of what she's done.
I didn't tell my mother I was doing this, and a friend of hers heard the broadcast, called her up and said, "Hey, you know, your daughter's on the radio talking about you." And my mother called me up and she was furious with me.
I was really threatened by that, to be honest with you.
And what was threatening about it?
Well, you know, I was in the I don't know stage. I don't know where I am in all of this, and going back to signing, you know, the whatever you call that paper that you sign for disclosure of information, and that holds for life, you know.
And my mother had come from a place of being very serious about her role in the military and honoring her code of secrecy, and I was, you know, out protesting war, and we were in very polar opposites about it, and she asked me to stop, and so I did. I stopped. I stopped all my public activism, although I continued to go to demonstrations. But we didn't talk about it again for a very long time, for 10, maybe almost 15 years.
And then she came back to visit me again, and she brought this big box of her Navy file. Because of my interest, she decided to share it with me, and I think some of it was heavy on her mind as well. I realized the secret she had kept had created a barrier between us, and I felt that learning more about her, I would get closer to her.
We had to do lab studies. X number of mice would be irradiated with X amount of X-rays, and we would expose the animals and study the tissue.
Man number one takes the entire cage and etherizes them until dead, but not so dead that rigor mortis has Man number two cuts through the peritoneum to remove the spleen, which is located on the left side.
We published 2 papers. I was co-author on 2 of them, and what we found out was that one of the signs of radiation illness would be a diminished spleen or complete obliteration of the thymus gland. I started thinking about what did they do with the information in terms of exposing human beings. But I never did anything about it. I just processed it internally, I guess. So there was no one to discuss it with anyway. Our whole work environment was structured around secrecy. I worked in a building that had different areas of research, but I had no idea of what this group was doing or what this group was doing. I didn't find myself sharing our information with any other group. It was all compartmentalized.
My very first memory of my mother, my very first memory ever, a fish jumped out of the aquarium we had, and my mother took a knife and cut it open and looked inside of it, and I was about 2 years old. I feel like I grew up in her lab, the one she worked in after she left the Navy. I have really strong memories about it. The smell of the gas from the Bunsen burners, and the jars and jars of organs in formaldehyde. It was kind of creepy in a way. For fun, she'd teach me how to dissect fetal pigs.
I was born and raised in Newport, Rhode Island, and went to Catholic schools. Went to a Catholic high school. I had a nun, Sister David Francis, and she was my science teacher, and she was the one who encouraged me in my interest in science.
When I realized that she was 23 years old, doing this cutting-edge research, I felt this sense of pride. I don't know if she'd call herself a feminist, but she's a formidable woman. Really strong, powerful, funny, intelligent. There's always been this level of fear of my mother, too. When she gets angry, she can be scary.
I was a fresh, what we call boot ensign, thrown into a group of highly intelligent, very focused researchers. I thought I was a real hotshot. You know, I thought, this is really very exciting, and this is why you joined the Navy.
I kept wanting to know more about my mom's options at that time. I found out about an oral history project being done on the Nevada test site, and I contacted some of the people working on it.
After World War II, there was a radical shift. You know, one of the most agonizing aspects of wartime for women and minorities is that they are briefly afforded equality and access in a way that they had never achieved before, only to have it be taken away when the extraordinary circumstance goes away. There was a collapsing of opportunity for both women and minorities at all levels of employment.
After World War II was over, all the women went back into the home, they became housewives, and it was just so not my mother's path. My mother always wanted to be a scientist, so she was in her element. And she joined the military knowing that she could have a career doing scientific research. And once she opened up and talked to me about it, it just raised more and more questions. Did you feel like you were doing something patriotic?
I don't ever remember getting I suppose it was patriotic, but I don't think that we were reminded you're doing this for your country. I don't think we were ever even reminded that you were doing anything for humanity. You were just doing research. I can honestly tell you that I did not know that I was going to the test site until sometime in January of '53.
My mom worked in the early part of the atomic testing program on a series of 11 detonations called Operation Upshot Knothole. Over the years of testing, almost 1,000 bombs were detonated.
In some ways, it was our biggest research job so far. The preparation job was big too. Many hundreds of tons of material and months of intense planning and labor by skilled personnel were the ingredients, poured into a gigantic test tube, our Nevada proving grounds.
When it came time to actually go to Nevada, I was bringing the animals from San Francisco to the test site.
Las Vegas, Nevada, the entertainment and fun capital of the world.
The relationship between the test site, the state of Nevada, and the city of Las Vegas in particular was chummy. There was an almost universal agreement among city leaders and promoters, and particularly the Las Vegas News Bureau, that this was just a great thing.
In a few seconds, you will witness a scene often viewed by the residents of Las Vegas, but an unusual thrill for the visitor. When these scenes were being filmed, scientists were standing by at the Nevada proving grounds 100 miles away to detonate an atomic device. Watch closely for a man-made sun.
Testing was an excellent vehicle for promoting the area, and the hotels capitalized on testing very, very early and recognized that this was another form of spectacular entertainment that they could promote.
Radioactive mama, hold me tight. Radioactive mama, treat me right. Radioactive mama, we'll reach critical mass tonight. Well, when we get together, clear away the crowd. There won't be nothing left except a mushroom-shaped cloud. Radioactive mama, treat me right. Radioactive mama, we'll reach critical mass tonight.
The airfield was Camp Desert Rock. You loaded everything into trucks and they took them out to Mercury. first time I went there, I went to check in. I was just about ready to put my gear away, and this gentleman comes down the hall in a towel and says, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, this is my billet." And he said, "I don't think so." He said, "I think you're in the wrong place." And it was the first time they had ever had a female officer go out there. And nobody really paid any attention to the fact that it was Pauline and not Paul, you know. So my billet then was a tent. When I look back on it, I had no security whatsoever. There I was, this only woman out there, and I didn't even think about it myself. I was more concerned about what kind of critters were going to come into the tent, because I was very much afraid of snakes. We would put the mice into these huge lead spheres at different areas around ground zero. And that happened the day before a shot. And we would sit up all night. We sat there and socialized and then waited until daybreak. That would be the time for the detonation. And we sat there on the hill and would link arms. We're told to put our heads down and not to look up. Some people did have special glasses. I was not one of those who had special glasses. The second time I was there, the light was so intense that I could actually see that light, even with my eyes closed. The thermal effect would have been the thermal energy that was coming along, and you could feel it just whoosh over you. And then the shock effect would come, and that's why we're holding on to each other, because it was sufficient enough that would push you back. And then at one point, someone would say it's okay to look up, and then I could see the mushroom. All the time that I was there, viewing this as a weapon was not in my personal frame of reference. My frame of reference was that we were studying the effects of radiation. Once we had the okay, we would get in the trucks and go down and retrieve. The spheres could be blown in different directions. You had to go out and search for them. We would take the mice out and bring them back to the lab. They came to realize that within the shock wave, there was radiation coming with the heat wave, and then there was residual radiation around ground zero. Everything within those perimeters were contaminated. That was the time when masking tape was first invented. You'd pull your socks up over at the bottom of your pants and tape them all up, and you'd tape your sleeves. Did nothing to protect your hair or your head. Come in loaded with radioactive dust in your hair. We just went in and took general showers and washed all the radiation out of our hair, the radiated sand, and let it go down the drain.
What they did to the desert was just horrific. I mean, it's like being on the moon. There are hundreds of craters and all this debris. The test site itself is the size of the state of Rhode Island. It's actually on Shoshone land. The Shoshone have been fighting for years to get that land back. The test site remains one of their sacred places.
We would do studies examining the mice. Most all of them got sacrificed. The thymus became an indicator, and the spleen also, for radiation illness. We got our findings very early on because we worked so quickly, and I was horrified to find out that they were putting our foot soldiers in these trenches around at varying distances from ground zero without any protective clothing. It became obvious that there was no communication between the researchers and the Army who were putting these foot soldiers in. I just dismissed it from my mind. That's the way in which nowadays, they call it compartmentalizing. There's a name for it. And so I just put that into another compartment and continued on with what my assignment was. When you're in the military, the ground rules are set, and you know what those ground rules are, and you buy into that, and you do what's expected of you.
They were doing the same things to those men that we did to the animals. But did they study those men? That's a piece that's missing. And that is probably why it was so hard for the atomic veterans to get medical care for their illnesses.
Shot 9, 26 KT, 2,400 feet high. Produced a small permanent set in the top chord with an... Shot 10, 500 feet high, 15 kiloton yield, with a precursor blast wave and a Mach stem. Milliseconds after the thermal flash, the incident shock wave reaches... It should be emphasized that a precursor can form only if the ground air layer... What was the alpha rate? The transit time?
Some of the real stalwart boosters of the test site will use this notion of a can-do spirit. We really got stuff done. And when you look at what was accomplished out there technologically, it really is, in a lot of ways, almost unbelievable. A lot of atomic history has focused on the geniuses and the Manhattan Project, all this kind of romance around it. And there's that mystique that surrounds nuclear secrets, nuclear knowledge, so that adds to a real feeling of specialness. It's exciting.
I thought, isn't this a hotshot thing? Am I going to have stories to tell about the fact that I saw an atomic detonation? How many people in the world see atomic detonations and have lived to tell it? I mean, that's what was going through my head. That's where my head was at that point.
But thinking about it today?
I should have been thinking about a lot of other things.
My day job was sending me to Japan, and I thought, well, maybe I'll go to Hiroshima. I was really afraid on the train. I didn't know what to expect. I was ashamed as an American to go there. I just felt like every single soul that died in Hiroshima in that bombing was still there. I felt surrounded by these souls.
"私より4世年上の姉はあの朝行ってきますと出て行ったきり未だに帰ってきません。 で私は当時6人家族だったんですけど、爆心地から 2.8 キロ離れた広島駅の少し東寄りに生活しておりました。これエルダシスター大
What was her name?
三重子。親にしたら自慢の娘だったみたいなんですが、父親は中学の教師をしてたもんですから、本当に徹底的に軍事教育を中学生にする時代だった。で自宅で母と2人の弟で朝食を食べてる時に飛行機の爆音が聞こえてきました。私も飛行機って思ったその瞬間なんです。ピカーって光って10秒で広島がなくなった日がゴーっていう感じで私らの方に山のように襲ってきました。でみんなもう何にも着てなくってパンパンに膨れ上がった人、髪の毛は逆立ちになって、もう本当に性別がわからない人も覚えております。でもう一晩でこういう感じで本当にもう広島中が燃える中を生き残った私たち周辺部だったからかろうじて生き延びた者が原っぱへみんな避難するんですけど、みんな水をください水をください言いながらバタバタバタバタ死んでいきました。もうとにかく体調が悪くって戻すものがないぐらいゲーゲーゲーゲー戻しながら、歯茎から血が出、頭に手をやったら髪の毛がバサッと抜ける。戦争が終わって広島の焼け野原はゴミも落ちてない。お腹がすくし、体調はみんな悪いし、生き残った者たちも何にもわからないまままたこの焼け野原で生活が始まったんです。で私の母は火が収まってから姉を迎えに行ってやらなきゃ、助けてやらんといけん、連れて帰りたい、裸足で姉を助けに行くんですけど、誰一人生き残った者はおりませんでした。その後に母は流産して起き上がることができなくなりました。
Thank you for sharing this with me.
ありがとうございます。私にその話をしてくださってありがとうございました。
今までだったら被爆体験と平和活動のことは話するんだけど、やっぱり自分の家族のこととかいえいえ、もうなんか私に知らず知らずこうなんか素直な気持ちで話ができたことにね。
There was 1953 in my life, and then comes 1992. And in between there, I didn't deal with all of this at all. When my tour of duty in the Navy was over, I came back to Newport and I got a job at the Naval Hospital.
My parents separated before I was born. My sister is 14 months older than I am. And my mother was a single parent, and she worked day and night. She got her teaching credential and started teaching 6th, 7th, 8th grade sciences and worked as a medical technologist at night. It was a really challenging time for her. I remember, being in 1st, 2nd grade, walking to church in the morning. My mother was not very religious then and was actually very angry with the Catholic Church. Because she was divorced, she wasn't welcome in the church anymore. I'd have a nickel and, light a candle for my mother that hopes that she wouldn't burn in hell because she couldn't go to church, I was very concerned about her as a child.
In the 90s, she renewed her faith.
I had become Episcopalian. I was accepted as an oblate in 1992.
As an oblate, she became a lay member of the Order of St. Benedict.
I make a commitment to say the Liturgy of the Hours, which is reading the Psalms on a daily basis. I also am part of the Pax movement, the peace movement, and pray for peace.
If she hadn't gone through her spiritual journey, I don't know how much we'd be talking about this. This probably never would have happened. I think in her scientific life, she was very disconnected and unemotional and very technical about everything. And when she went on this spiritual journey, she began to feel things in a way I don't think she had before. And it's all about being connected and telling the truth. And that's the intimacy I've been wanting with her.
My class, the first class graduating from Salve Regina, had their 50th anniversary. And they came and interviewed me. And the article went on about different things that I'd done. Sylvia made history as a researcher observing atomic bomb tests in 1953. And it was well written. But when I actually saw it in print and started reading it and thinking about how glib I was, you know, in talking about this, and that really sent me into a crisis of conscience. Looking back on it, I remember this sign that was going to be outside my office. The sign said Thermal Injury Branch. That took us into a new project, which we did right there in San Francisco, using different dosages of radiation. The thermal injury studies that we did were comparable to what happened to the people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's essentially the same findings. And for that we used dogs. And we had some thoroughbred beagle dogs that had a genetic history, and you could trace them back. And then we used Mongol dogs that were picked up at the pounds. And that was somehow or other, the studying the mice didn't really bother me that much, but and I began to react to the dogs, not at the time that we were doing it, but several years later, it started to hit me. At the time that we were doing it, I was just doing it, sort of like you knew what the project was and what the goal was, and so you thought you were doing a good thing. And in reality, we did. We were able to get some good studies on thermal injuries. We literally burned these dogs right down to the skin. And they had all these burns and ulcerations all over their legs and in their ears and their face. And when I started thinking about it, and I realized the first time I took my cats in for their checkup, when I adopted them, October of 1995, I took them in. And I could hear their toenails scratching on the table. And it took me back to those dogs and how they scratched at the table. They were in such pain and agony. And from that point on, when I take my cats in for their yearly checkups and that, Tulula was sick, but anyway, I can't go in the room with them. I can't stand to hear the sound of their toenails on the table because it's just too much for me. And I began to think about all of those things.
この方のお母さんはね、要するに動物を扱って放射線の被害を受けた動物を調べられたわけですよね。だからまだお母さんはそれでも良心の呵責にね、最後はいろいろ苦しまれたと。だから人間を扱ってそれが放射線の影響で分かってね、それに対して正しい対応ができないという場合の医者の苦しみっていうのはね、想像していただけると思うんです。それから引き返して私の村へ帰って、次々逃げてくる人の診療を始めたんですが、その当時その村に九州や四国の遠くからね、私のような軍員をしてた人が命令で援助に入ってきたために、私の村にもね、私を含めて28人医者が揃ったんです。それから看護婦が約100名ぐらい入りました。だけど常時、1万人近い人が寝てるわけですから。我々が習ったこともないし、それから経験したことももちろんない、教科書にもないような症状で死んでいくわけですから、その放射能が人間にどんな害を与えるかっていうのは全然知らないわけです、当時は。自分の全然知らない状態で人が死ぬっていうのは、僕らは手も足も出ないために怖かったんですね。
The bomb at the end of the war. But at the time, there wasn't much information out there about what really happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
I do remember when the atomic bombs were dropped, but it didn't have any impression on me. What was I, 15 years old? Mm-hmm. It wasn't in my level of awareness, I have to be honest about that. I mean, at 15, I guess I wasn't very socially conscious. I came to realize that the work that I was doing was just a continuation of the atomic detonations. Only my aspect of it was the biological effectiveness, whereas they were looking at weaponry.
It seems like the life of the test site was full of constant moral decisions at all levels of the hierarchy. You know, they could have involved putting pigs in uniforms and incinerating them. The human element really complicates the story. And I think that often atomic weapons and atomic testing in the Cold War in general are told in big, broad strokes. Easy ideas about what was right or wrong or what you might have done personally differently had you been in their shoes. And when you get down to the human level, you learn that there are complexities to the story that the big swath doesn't cover. the instant that the first bomb was exploded at the Trinity site in New Mexico, there were some profound doubts on the part of the scientists, even when it appeared Hitler was actively working on the same thing. It was a moment where scientists had to ask whether knowing everything should be the ultimate goal. That there were some things that possibly should simply not be known.
There is this sense when you talk to people involved with the test site that there's something so huge about this question and this problem. Perhaps 300,000 people have died worldwide as a result of nuclear testing. I was sitting next to a woman one day and she said, "Those are the best years of my life out at the test site." And the guy next to her grew up in the same little town in Nevada, said, "You know, if I could take back the day I walked through those gates, I would."
I don't think as a member of the Navy, I don't think, looking back on it, I could have said no. Although I have to honestly say that never entered into my level of awareness to say no. But I think that if I said no, then they would have said adios.
When we got introduced to Ray Harbert, it was the first time she got a chance to talk to someone who knew what she knew and who had also worked at the test site.
They're fond memories, but there's some sad memories that go along with them. I was resident engineer on Bikini during the Castle series, and the first detonation was Bravo, March 1st, 1954. We saw the mushroom cloud developing and rising, and it was huge. And the scientist next to me said, "My God, we got an overyield." The original forecast was 3 to 7 megatons. They finally arrived at a figure of 15 megatons. And I'm suffering from that today. I have skin cancer, and I'm still getting removed. I also regret what happened to the Marshall Islands people. It changed their whole society. We sent a destroyer up there to take the Marshallese natives off Rongelap because the radiation was so high. All of a sudden, a warship shows up and a bunch of Marines come in and say, "We're going to resettle you." With their non-knowledge of radiation, how are they going to react?
It was really difficult for my mom to start talking about it because she felt like she was sworn to secrecy for life. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of this information is declassified today. And when other people were talking about it, I think that gave her permission.
I was in San Francisco at that time at the Naval Radiological Defense Laboratory. And one day we received notice that we had some animals coming in from the island, Rongelap.
Yeah.
And obviously they had radiation illness.
Yeah.
There was no question about it. Of course, at the time, all I knew was that they came from an island in the Pacific. Those people were only returned to their island just recently. Some of them did have radiation illness. They had a lot of cancer.
One island on Ina-Wetak had to be cemented over to seal in the heavy radiation there. We are ill-prepared to handle what we were unleashing.
And to take responsibility for it. When they look back at this culture, they're going to say they were not responsible people.
My mother and I have gone through periods of talking about it and then years of never talking about it. Do you experience the same kind of thing together?
2人でこういうことについて話し合うとかいうことはあまりなかったと思います。
母からこういうふうになってたんだよって捜査に聞いたのが昨日も申し上げましたけど、本当ここ何年か前の話なので、それ以前はやはり自分のこととして身内がそういうことを起こってるんだっていうことを実際肌で感じてなかったというか、実際母がこういうふうな体験をしてたんだなっていうふうなのが分かって、現実なんだと。
How do you feel about your mom telling her story?
素晴らしいことだと思います。やはり胸が詰まる。ごめんなさい。
My mother was pregnant when she was working on all this stuff with my sister and I. She was pregnant with both of us. So I had some concerns about my own health and my sister's health.
This physicist had like a placard in his office and it said, "Stay fertile with a Nurdle girdle." And Nurdle was Naval Radiological Defense Laboratory. And what the Nurdle girdle was a lead shield.
And did you wear those lead aprons and stuff?
Yeah. We had dosimeters that we were testing, and we had the badges.
So there was the Nurdle girdle and the masking tape at ground zero, and they kept measuring her exposure to radiation with dosimeters.
I can remember one time I had 3 different dosimeters in my pocket that they were testing.
Because that was Bechtel?
Yes, the dosimeters did come from Bechtel. I don't know what the outcome of those testings were, how effective they were, but we did it.
My mom won't allow me to say what all of her health issues are. Do you feel that any of your health issues are related to your exposure?
No. There's nothing clinically to associate that at all with. No. In most of the instances of people who are identified as atomic veteran have illnesses or whatever associated with the being associated with atomic energy and that. And I just don't fit in there.
I find that hard to believe that, that it had no effect on her. And, I don't know what the truth or what the answer to that is, and it's hard to prove that, but I wanted her to write to Bechtel and get her dosimeter readings. I wanted her to be more proactive in, looking at that part of it. And she's always been resistant to that, and she's really not wanted to go there. And she doesn't want to be seen as a victim.
And I see her as having something wrong done to her. So we have this point of disagreement.
It's August 14th, and I took my mother to the Veterans Hospital today. And there I was, pushing my mom in a wheelchair down all these hallways. And all of these veterans who were ill. Veterans from World War II, Vietnam vets, and then these Iraqi veterans, these really young guys. And everywhere you turned, in the elevators, in the hallways, there were signs about suicide prevention. Call this number. Or PTSD. Call this number. And I was thinking, God, did she experience PTSD? I mean, is that what's going on for her now, 50 years later? The doctors, they were so kind. They hadn't seen her in like 6 months, and she's been through hell and hospitalized twice. And then when my mother thanked them for helping her get this medication she needs, and the veterans will pay for it. And I'm sitting there just going, it's the least they can do for you. And she looked at me like, don't even go there. And I shut up. And I was so angry leaving that place. And we were so not on the same page.
We had an aerial detonation. And in St. George, Utah, there was radioactive material in clouds that came over.
They were careful not to test when the wind was blowing towards Los Angeles, but the folks in St. George, Utah, experienced fallout repeatedly over several years. My mom was at Camp Mercury when this happened. She knew that it was top secret, and she told me, now don't say anything about this to anyone. I started to encourage her that she should tell the truth about what really happened.
Colonel Veenstra was a veterinarian, and he took care of our animals that we used. And he disappeared one day, and he was gone for about 3 days. And he came back, and he was very quiet, and there were some specimens that he brought back. They were extremely radioactive. He didn't have anything much to say about where he was or what he had done, but several weeks down the road, he started to talk about his St. George experience. He said that he stood on a hill, and in every direction that he looked were the carcasses of dead sheep, horses, cows. Miles and miles of them. And he was there within a day or two after the shot had taken place. They tried to silence him. They were trying to get him to change his report. They called us together one day, and it was, I don't know how you say it, but gag order, maybe that's the term that's used today, but that wasn't what they told us, but that it was secret information and that there was to be no discussion, and it had gotten out that Colonel Veenstra had been there, and there was to be no discussion about it.
Code for Japanese Press, issued 21st of September, 1945.
The press code was initiated immediately after the bombings by the Allied forces, and it wasn't lifted until 1952.
Nothing should be printed which might directly or indirectly disturb the public tranquility. There shall be no false or destructive criticism of the Allied powers. There shall be no destructive criticism of the Allied occupation. News stories must be factually written and completely devoid of editorial opinion.
でその中で私がどうしても許せないことが一つある。それは広島と長崎の原爆で被害を受けた人たちは自分の経験した見たことや病気のことや何もかも一切これは人に喋ってはいけないと。それから書いてもいけないと。もちろん絵や写真で残してもいけない。その理由は原子爆弾に関することはアメリカ軍の機密であると。日本の医師や学者に対してはね、医師は被爆者が診療を求めてきた場合には当然それは診療するのはいいと。ただしその中身をね、医師同士が相談をしたり、あるいは学会で研究をしたりね、調査をすることは一切いけないと。
I went online and found out you could do a tour of the test site. I asked her if she wanted to come and see it and visit the new Atomic Testing Museum in Las Vegas. She said she did. You have to apply to get on the tour. They do this whole background check, and I was really surprised they let me go because I had been arrested for anti-war protesting.
This is my recollection of what I actually saw, you know, when I think back on what I was witnessing. Very vividly, that's in my memory, that type of a picture.
This is Boris Karloff. No one can guarantee the survival of every home during a nuclear war, but a strong civil defense can save millions of lives. Make sure that yours is one of them. Learn how to protect your home. Call Civil Defense today.
When you're riding in the bus on the way up there, they have video screens on the bus, and they just show you detonation after detonation after detonation, and it's very technical and very patriotic and nothing about the humanity. Yeah, see, look, they did studies on vegetables grown on the test site and farm animals.
What did they do with the information?
The tour guide would say things like, well, we've been bombing out here for years and the water's just fine. We'll just keep drinking this water out here. Or he would say things that I could just feel like my mother just getting really agitated, and I was really glad I was in between them because I felt like she was just gonna, I don't know what she would have done with him.
You know, the interesting thing about this is that these mannequins in these houses in this situation would have had thermal injuries. They would have to have. That's a mortal sin.
It is.
That they've left that out.
I agree with you 100% that the human element is missing from the museum on that part. The highlight is the destruction and the Big Bang.
The Big Bang and the big hole.
Yeah.
How big a hole can we make with this? That was the pivotal point of his
Well, it's
tour.
a damn crater is what you're talking about.
I know. I wouldn't dignify them with the word of crater. I'd call it a hole.
Yeah.
Because that's what it means to me.
Yeah.
When I was at the Test Site Museum in Las Vegas, I thought of the Hiroshima Museum, where they display personal belongings left behind by the victims. When we were in the museum store in Las Vegas, there was a pair of earrings of Fat Man and Little Boy, the two bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it was that part of it that she was just couldn't understand. It was really an emotional experience for her to go. And there was a part of me that thought, you know, maybe I shouldn't have offered this to her. Maybe this is harder. Maybe going through this is going to be detrimental, not helpful. But, you know, she holds on to a lot of stuff. I thought it would be good for her to come and just see it again, and maybe she could make some peace with it. And I could with her. There was this one moment where, you know, they stop the bus and let you get out and stand at Ground Zero, and it's actually at a Ground Zero spot at one of the detonations my mother was at. And she got off the bus and she walked out into the desert and she started to pray. Tears just streaming down her face.
Yeah, I do remember that. And I believe I was praying for forgiveness.
After you went to the test site, what was that like for you?
What did you come away with?
It brought back a lot of different memories of things.
Clouds, aren't they beautiful?
I think my compartmentalization kind of broke down a little bit.
You have to be here to experience it. Yep. No one can tell you about it.
One of the most difficult things to explain is why the lessons of war are rarely learned. It's hard to be hopeful that people would ever learn that something could be so horrific that it could never happen again.
People don't realize what happened on the ground in Hiroshima when the bomb was dropped. The history of that has been so clouded in secrecy.
A simmering controversy over a Smithsonian exhibit featuring the Enola Gay, the B-29 that bombed Hiroshima, erupted anew today with veteran groups and others appealing to Congress and the White House for the show to be canceled.
The Smithsonian exhibit in 1995 had huge protests against showing what really happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So much information was suppressed by politicians and veterans who didn't want the United States to see what really happened. They spent a lot of money shining up the Enola Gay, and they eliminated any reference to death in the exhibit.
Being a strict scientist, that question that comes to my mind about documentary, it was that you had the copies of my service record and where I went essentially was documented so that I felt comfortable in talking about upshot knothole, because there's that discipline in myself that whatever is in this documentary has to have substantiation.
Well, I think, you know, it's not in your naval record that you studied tissue samples from St. George, Utah. That was all kept very top secret. But it happened. It was real. It was part of your experience.
But the government would say it didn't happen.
Right, but that's why we need to say what really happened and tell the truth.
Like Dr. Hito.
Yeah, like Dr. Hito. He was suppressed.
Yeah. So.
で広島では原爆キエフに行った時、そしてドイツに行った時、そして国内でいろんなところで被爆証言させてもらった時に一番私がこう感じたのは周りの環境によって教育ですよね。ものの考え方が教育されるのは子どもの時だなっていうのを感じたんです。今思い出しても私ね、本当に軍事教育いう言葉が徹底的に私たちされてたんだなっていうのが分かりますよ。だから父が退職した後、自分の娘も亡くしてるいうこともあるんだけど、命の大切さを分かるような人間になってくれいうことを言いましたね。ただ私今娘が難病にかかってるんですけどね、10年ぐらい前にその主治医の先生が原爆病院紹介するから行ってくださいって言われて、広島の原爆病院に行って検査する間に本当に心配したのが、やっぱり被爆者は自分の子供に後遺症娘に出たかなっていう心配ですよね。で検査の結果血小板減症いう病名だったんです。血が増えない病気なんですよね。まあだからその時は、結婚した当時だったんですけど、子供を産むのはもう諦めてください言われて、 難病のものは回復したわけじゃないんだけど、やっぱりこう治療の会があって、子供を作ることも先生のこう了解のもとでね。でも今現在は4人の孫がいるんです。女の子ばっかりなんだけど8歳と6歳とで、下は双子の女の子でね若草物語やってます。本当に幸せだわ、アメリカの人と一緒にこうしてね、平和公園を歩けるっていうのも。私自身最初にお話を伺った時に、お母さんには何にももう責任もないし罪もないし、お母さんがそういうふうにこう苦しまれることがどうしたら少しでもこう気持ちが和らげるかなっていうことで、何もできないのが鶴だったんですよね。
So I brought these paper cranes for you. The story behind them is there was this young girl named Sadako Sasaki who was 2 years old when the bomb was dropped. She died of leukemia when she was 12. But while she was sick, she folded these cranes hoping she would get better.
Oh my.
And now children all over Japan fold these cranes as a symbol of peace. And Miss Okada, she asked me to bring them to you.
Beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Look at that. Each one is so different. The beauty of that.
Well, I think the part that's so moving to me about it are these were made for you by survivors of the atom bomb. And they wanted you to have them, knowing that the work that you did.
In spite of the work that I did.
But their message is so benevolent. It's about peace.
I put one in front of each one of our soldiers here.
兵隊さんの写真があって、兵隊さんの前に一つずつ送ってもらいました。
ありがとうございます。いや、お母さん本当に優しい方なんですね。
Your mother is such a kind person.
Yes, yes.
はい。
それだけに長い時間本当にこう苦しまれて。
So she must have suffered a lot for a long time. 昨年広島は被爆60周年いうんで世界から本当にたくさんの人が訪ねてくださったり放映されて、
じゃあ世界の核がなくなったかって言ったら全く変わってないんですよね。
The bombs they have today are many times larger than the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. You know, up to 100 times larger. In Russia, there are 2,500 hydrogen bombs on hair trigger alert. And America's got 5,500 ready to go. The only way we can get disarmament is an educated public.
The test site every year around Easter time, they do this anti-nuclear protest. We marched down the street and this woman turned to me and she said, "Hey, would you mind holding this banner for me for a minute?" And I said, "Sure." And then I looked down and it said Atomic Veterans on it, which is what my mother is, and I got very emotional. We got down to the entrance and all the police guards were there. And the tradition is that then they cross the line and they get arrested. And so I just decided, why not? When you came to my house last year and we started talking about when we all got arrested, what did you think about all of that?
I could see where MT would do something like that, yeah. If you had told me that you were going to do it, I hoped that I would have said to you, if you believe in it, go ahead and do it.
Dear Miko-san, I write giving thanks to you for sharing your life experiences with my daughter. There are no words to describe what I feel for you. On the 6th of August, 1945, I was 15 years old, oblivious to what my government had done to your beloved family and friends. Listening to your story, I have a strong sense of shame and sorrow. I believe your people are my people. I particularly appreciate your generous gift of the peace cranes. Their beauty masks the horror of their origin. I tell my friends about the beautiful, soulful woman who graciously sent them to me. I have come to know you as a determined, experienced mother whose purity of heart and deep spirituality has made you whole again. You shared pictures of your family. I send you pictures of my family. Our families are one and the same. We were created by a loving God. Most respectfully, Pauline Sylvia.
Thank you so much. ありがとう、ありがとう。
I've moved to a place of being way more accepting of what my mother did than I was 10 years ago. I think we're closer because we've been able to talk about this time, which had been such a secret for so many years. I'm a lot less judgmental and more forgiving, and I had hoped that she could get to that same place with me. And I'm not so sure she's as forgiving of herself as I am. You know, Mom, it seems like you still feel responsible, but you weren't the person in power.
Well, let me answer it this way, that if you asked me to do it today, I would say, no way. I would not have participated.
I've been writing some
lyrics for a song, and the chorus goes, "Truth be told."
Yeah, excellent. Excellent.
That's the name of the song.
Yes, truth be told. Very good beginning.